Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, we dig into the challenges facing unions in a rapidly shifting economy. There are rising layoffs in the government and private sectors. There is, of course, the dismantling of DEI initiatives, evolving technology of AI, there's our tariffs. There's a renewed push on immigration deportations. And of course, as a result, organized labor is feeling the pressure. How are unions adapting to protect their members? What's the human cost of these policy changes? We're drilling down on all of those questions and more. My guests tonight are James Slevin, National President of the Utilities Workers Union of America, and Dr. Vanessa Weaver, a longtime friend of this program. She is an organizational psychologist. She has more than 3 decades of experience guiding companies through transformations. And of course, she is a longtime DEI expert. I want to thank both of you for joining me in this important conversation. Let me start with you, Jim. For those who are unfamiliar with the Utilities Workers Union, who do you represent?
Yeah, first of all, I thank you for having me here for this conversation. I think it's so vitally important. Like you had said, my name is Jimmy Slevin. I'm the national president for the Utilities Workers Union of America, UWA. We represent membership in the utility sector from distribution, transmission, from the electric side to the transmission side of the electric grid to the gas distribution and gas transmission. We also represent those who are in generation, from the coal to the nuclear, to tree trimmers that clear our lines, to water and clean drinking water, to wastewater, and some other sectors that are included in that.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot.
Yeah. So Harold, this is like the people who come to your house to fix your utility issues, or for some folks turn off their utilities, unfortunately, or turn them on, or whatever. So it's quite relevant to our lives.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people do not realize that, that there are those workers who are represented by unions, and it's very likely that whether they come to your home or you see them in your community, that each and every one of these workers are members or in some way affiliated with the Utilities Workers Union.
Yeah, we represent a majority of the workers, but there's other unions that are on a property of utilities from other organizations. But actually, the utility world is very heavily unionized for workers' rights, and that started decades ago for folks that were working in some dirty, clean coal plants to workers that were exposed to asbestos in electric lines. So we've been in the industry for a good period of time. I have almost 39 years as a utility worker.
Okay, wonderful. I do want to ask you, Jim, there have been a great many layoffs across government sectors and even some private companies. What impact has that had on your membership base?
So I appreciate you asking me that. We don't encounter a lot of layoffs at this current moment. But I will tell you, for years, we have seen some shift in the workplaces. We've seen coal plants that have shut down across the United States, and those folks have been displaced or working for different utilities today. But the impacts of layoffs today has an impact, though, in the federal government. Just from what we do as labor organizations, it's not just my labor organization, but there's not as many people in the Department of Labor as it was before, or Department of Energy. So when we're trying to access these agencies for certain things, there's sometimes people on the other side of lines, and sometimes there's nobody, or there's relationships we've built over time. There's other impacts that are really detrimental to making sure that workers' safety is out there. OSHA is under the Department of Labor, has been gutted. We see NIHOSH also. These are the folks that kind of do a background look and do some chemical testing to make sure that these chemicals are okay for the workplace. So we're seeing impacts of that where we don't have these agencies up and running like they were in the prior administration and for over decades. There's a purpose for having them there, for workers to make sure they can go home and come into work the next day.
Well, that's
I want to say for NIOSH, they had 1,000 people in the organization. In April, they would cut 850.
Yeah.
So this organization that is so critical for the safety.
Yeah.
So let me back up and have you help me with the alphabet soup, because our listeners have no idea what NIOSH is. So what is that?
NIOSH is the National Institution of Occupational Safe and Healthy. It's kind of like a group that kind of comes together when we see things come into the industry. So when we saw asbestos and what the latency period of asbestos and the health industry sides of it, they would look at it. And so what do you need for it? How do you work around it now that it's in the industry? How do you make sure that workers are protected from simple as filtered cartridges on their faces to make sure they have Tyvek suits on when they remove it. So they're vitally important to it. And it doesn't just sit for my industry. It also sits for nurses that are in emergency rooms to, bus drivers to making sure that there's health and safety is out there.
Let me ask you this, Jim, if I may, because, from a layman's point of view, particularly when you were talking about utility workers, and certainly to the layman, you're only talking about electrical, but that can be quite expansive. Are you concerned that during the next natural disaster, where we have seen utility workers from one state go to help communities in other states because they've lost power, they've lost those resources? Is that something that is in the union wheelhouse for you?
Every day it is. It's more prevalent today than it was years ago. Years ago, we only saw linemen go out and do that work. But truth be told, it's every worker that's needed today. And if it's a gas issue or a electric issue or even just a water issue, there's a need for making sure the infrastructure is up and brought up to the standards that folks need in order to get the economics of the communities and households back to it. I mean, we have people that are working from home today to education from homes, right? So we're vitally important for it. The difference, though, I will tell you that I've seen over time is that the staffing levels of a lot of our utilities are understaffed. So there's not as many workers, and they rely on neighboring utilities to send folks in to kind of help out when these disasters happen. Unfortunately, the disasters aren't just a storm coming in, they're widespread. So the neighboring utility doesn't or will not release some of the resources that are needed in the next county over or the next state or the next two states over because they're worried about their own resources. And that makes an impact. So you got folks, we'll say, that are coming into an area in the east where they're traveling in from the west, from California, and vice versa. I remember Sandy coming through the Northeast, and it was a 100-year storm. Well, we've had a good amount of them since. So these storms are coming rapidly. They're coming where it used to be in flood zones of 3 feet of water to now 6 feet of water. They're a lot different than what they were, and the resources are a lot different. We're seeing, like I said, floods to wildfires. We're seeing devastation in areas where, grids have to be shut down temporarily in order for workers to come in, from firefighters to paramedics to just even utility workers. And now when they restart them up, they need workers. So, you think about if we shut your gas grid down because of a disaster, we need to have folks out there to make sure the appliances are lit well so that there's not gas leaking in your home, right? Yeah. We need to make sure that the pipe structure that had gas flowing to it now doesn't have gas when it's re-energized in it and moving, that it's not leaking and prone to leaks in the communities for the health and safety of the communities in it. We see where workers who are on lines, generators are out there today But the truth this side of it, it's kind of harder than ever before to make sure we're coming in and evaluating the damage and making those repairs. The fire, what's the damage in fires? Is insulation damage to the overhead lines, to the utility pole before we put those lines back up?
Vanessa, I wanted to ask you, as it relates to what Jim just shared with us, what is the true human toll when there are some of these economic and political issues hanging out there? Tariffs, DEI, deportations, AI. I know that's a long list, but your thoughts.
But it's a common thread in terms of the human toll. So thank you for that question. And many workers, whether they are frontline or senior executives, are feeling very unsettled in their workplaces. About 2,000 companies, not just in the utility sector, as Jim indicated, it's probably less pronounced in that sector, but just in 2,000 companies have indicated they're going to be laying people off pretty substantially this year. And so people are concerned about their employment, about their investments, about their ability to maintain the kind of lifestyle that they've established. And it's interesting too, as we've looked in the federal sector, and we've been talking a lot about this whole concept of survivor remorse, where the people who are left behind to do the work, like we just talked about OSHA, 850 people are laid off out of an organization of 1,000. NIOSH, out of organization of 1,000. Those 150 people that are left still have to deliver everything that organization did. And so the folks who are left are feeling overworked. 70% of them are stressed out. The American Psychological Association did a study that says 70% of folks who remain after people have been let go are highly stressed out. We know that there is a drop in morale and employee engagement, almost like 35% are disengaged. And this is costing American society over $450 billion in loss, revenue and loss, underproductivity and those kinds of things. And then, like as you indicated, Harold, the psychological trauma that people are under, we call it workforce PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of just feeling anxiety, feeling, like I said, disengaged, feeling unclear about what the world, when they go into their workplaces, are they going to have a job? And if so, what are their rights? Because the rules that typically govern what your rights and the obligations of the employer to you have been challenged. So folks don't really even know how to defend themselves appropriately.
So with that point, Jim, from your perspective, how is your union trying to address the employment uncertainty?
So we want to make sure that we have job security into our collective bargaining agreements, making sure that workers are valued for what they are. And reality is that workers really keep this country going. It's not the executives, it's really the hands-on workers. And if anything, we saw that during COVID. We saw men and women stepping up to a plate, making sure that society kept moving and growth in ways. There were also the workers bring economic growth into communities. And we want to make sure that they're not like looked at as a disposable rag, and making sure that if there is a displacement for work in the industry, that those workers are of value somewhere else. And making sure that we're gaining the knowledge and the base of their values, and making sure that we continue striding, not just for them, for their families, for the community they serve also. So collective bargaining is important for us. It's where we get a contract and make sure that there's job security. It's also looking at companies to make sure there's pressure on companies and government to make sure that there's growth in work. We know the study that came out recently on the grid in the United States, it did better than the years before, but it went from a C- to a C+. We're in a bad situation. Reliability is getting to be more concerning. So there should be job growth rather than job loss.
Jim, hold that point, if I may, because I do have to take a break, and I don't want you to forget your point, because you've touched on a lot of issues, and I want to do a deeper dive into that. But stay with us. Don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141, in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversations about unions and the ever-shifting economic and political climate. My guests are James Slevin, National President of the Utility Workers Union of America, and Dr. Vanessa Weaver. She is an organizational psychologist with 30 years of experience guiding companies through transformations, and she is also a DEI expert. Trying to get my mouth to work right on a Monday.
It's a mouthful, I tell you.
Yes, it is. Well, and that's why we have you on the program.
I'll take any compliment. Thank you.
Yes, because you know what you're talking about. But Jim, before the break, we were, talking about, how the union is adjusting. Please continue your point.
Yeah, so we make sure when we talked about if there's layoffs, that if there's other places within the industry or other portions of the company, we can shift workers there without any diminishing pay or making sure that they're valued for it. Years of experience of a worker, no matter what industry they're in, is a true value. You can get books and put them on a shelf, but the truth be told, the hands and knowledge of a worker is worth more than any book out there. They've seen, they've felt, and they've experienced a lot different. So, laying off is the last option we feel. We feel there's a place for every worker, and that place should be someplace in the workplace.
Well, that would make a lot of sense as far as I'm thinking, because utility workers are very, very much like teachers or, other union represented workers who are necessary for communities to not just survive and to thrive. So from a layman's perspective, if one company that you're working for may be laying off, is it difficult to find it? If you're a good worker, is it difficult to find a job with another company? Because you still need to keep the lights on. You still need to keep the water running. You still need to make sure that the mechanics and whatever these utility workers are working on, you got to keep things working.
Yeah. So we try to make sure that if there's a hosting utility next to a place that may have an impact, we'll say if it's a plant that is shutting down, that plant worker now can shift into maybe a different side of it. So if it went from a nuclear industry to a natural gas industry, making sure that they're working and educate them, tool them up. Workers want to make a transformative kind of work way that they can continue to supply for their families. We see impacts of climate issues that are impacting the utility workers from natural gas to coal plants, but there should be a place for each and every one of those workers. Now, those things come with sometimes a little additional impacts to the workers. They may not be as close to the plant as they used to be, but we want to make sure that however that transition is, it's less of a drag on their family, so they could still make sure they can afford a living.
Vanessa, I do want to get your opinion based on your experience in dealing with corporations, because we know whether it's a teachers union and a city government, whether it is Starbucks and the baristas, there has always been a clash between management and the unions. I'm sure management is thinking, look, business is business, and we have to deal with the bottom line. As Jim was suggesting, we want to protect our workers. We want to protect their jobs and their benefit. Why is there this constant clash between these two kinds of organizations?
Well, I know Jim could probably speak to that historically a lot better than I, but I can tell you from the consulting perspective, there's often a constant clash because both parties aren't really talking to each other. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, they're talking at each other, but not to each other. And we find out that those organizations where there is an alignment between management and union, there's a commitment to, first of all, the success that organization delivering the product and services to its customer. There's a belief and a commitment that the customer is first, and the quality of the services we provide on whatever perspective we're on is the most important thing. And the second aspect that I see when it's working is that management has a respect for the frontline worker, for that immediate supervisor. And by respect, they ask their opinion. Oftentimes we say 90% of the solutions that can solve some of the day-to-day problems in the workforce go out the door when people go home. Because many times, unfortunately, the leadership in companies don't ask those individuals, well, what do you think will make it work? Well, let's put our heads together as a team and figure out how to solve this problem. So you usually have dictates coming from the top down, and the top has this perspective, but often doesn't know the nitty-gritty that it takes to really deliver that service or that product. And I know that in several of the unions that Jim represents, they have saved millions of dollars in cost savings and improving operational efficiencies because the management connected with the union and those frontline workers, and they came together to solve issues that had tremendous payout and benefit. And of course, everybody benefits from that. If the company is healthy, the union is healthy. If the union feels like they are part of the company, they're respected, they're valued, their opinions matter, not just lip service, but they're really considered and factored in, you have increased engagement, more excitement, more willingness to go the extra yard.
Well, what's been your experience, Jim? As you said, 39 years in, one could argue that you've seen it all.
So, first of all, I have to say Dr. Weaver is almost like a union leader when she speaks, because she's right on point. For decades, unions and companies have been battling each other, but in reality, they're talking at each other, not with each other. Here's the side. I need a place for my members to work. They need a place to operate. We both have common goals. We both have common workplace issues. We may have disagreements, but the truth be told, if we're not having conversations, we're not working on those disagreements. And we're not going to continue having a relationship to agree and disagree. There's nothing wrong with that, but the work is really put into it. It's very easy to manage the word no, or it's very easy to say, I'm not going to do that. But when you have an issue or a problem in front of you and you work on it, you kind of work on both sides of the house. You work on what's the needs of the company and what's the needs of the union. I didn't see that over years. I saw it. I saw things change. I saw when I first started the industry in the 80s, I saw a company more turn around and say, if I do well, the workers do well. Then I saw a point of, union downturning and kind of companies turn around saying, I'm the boss and you're the horse. And you're going to do the way I say it, rather than listening to the voice of the workers. Things have changed over time. I saw deregulation come into my industry and gut my industry, and nobody benefited from it. Workers didn't benefit it, nor did consumers benefit from it. I see differences today, though, coming in where some companies are saying, here is an issue I'm facing. I have a problem with it. I want to engage you in the solution of it. Those things are starting to change. Is that with every company? Not at all. But it's with a good number of it. And the only way you resolve those issues is to put the issues in your forefront. I had a problem in around 2012 where I had thousands of members locked out on the street by a corporation. That changed after the CEO had changed in the company, and I became the president of that local. When the CEO met me that day, he had a conversation with me. And in the conversation, he said, I stand on a podium at my stockholders meeting and tell everybody that the most important thing to me is my employees. And I've heard you stand on the podium and talk to your membership at union meetings and say the most important piece to my membership is my membership. They're both the same, my membership and his employees. If we're saying they're the most valuable piece, let's put it together because they are the same, and let's treat it like the most valuable piece. And that's how I approach a lot of pieces to it. Like putting it to a point of that worker has a value to the company and to the union to make sure that we resolve issues, to make sure that we come to a common ground with it. Sometimes that's not easy, And sometimes that's not the answer some people want to hear, because it's very easy to fight, very easy to fight. But the truth is if you're trying to resolve things, it's better off for both parties. Not for me. It's for both parties. We come to it all the time. We get to collective bargaining agreements. A contract is not a union contract. It's a contract between the company and the union. There's two signatories to that contract, the company and the union. It's an agreement between both of them. If we can do that during the toughest times, we could do it on every day.
Jim, let me ask you this, particularly as it relates to your constituency, utility workers. What do you believe is the biggest threat to success moving forward for your union? Is it DEI? Is it AI or other technology issues? What do you think it is?
So there's in the industry, there's a huge amount of threats. Like, where is the future, right? Where is the future utility? We see the demand of AI and data centers coming on the grid issues. Is that going to impact the workers and the communities they serve? Because if the lights are out or there's not gas flowing, the community gets upset, and it's the workers they see on the front line of it. So we have those impacts to it. We do see AI in certain things coming into the industry. I worry about my call centers, making sure that you have a live person on the other end of it, making sure that you have somebody to talk to. I think somebody deserves somebody to talk to. I get frustrated when I have an automatic call on it. But then there's other pieces that are coming in the AI world that we should be embracing. My men and women work around high voltage or in very dangerous situations. If we can have a robot work and take out a breaker rather than a physical person in that danger zone, I'd rather have that, because now I know my worker is going to go home. Technology should not displace workers. It should make workers safer and make sure they have a better workplace tomorrow, not to take them out of the workplace. And we need to make sure that we're at the forefront of that in collective bargaining. And we've done some of that in our collective bargaining agreements, but also kind of work and talk to everybody. I'm not comfortable getting into a car with autonomy, right? Autonomous drivers. Maybe somebody else is, but I want to know what's making them comfortable where I'm not comfortable. So talk about that. And how do we got to make sure that workers are so important? The other thing that's impacting is our energy policy in the United States. We know that climate change is an issue. We know that it's in the forefront of it, but we can't have an energy policy for communities today that is do the opposite of the prior administration and vice versa. We can't keep flip-flopping back. We have to address the issue of climate change, make sure workers are in the forefront, making sure communities are in the forefront of it, and making sure that you're listening to peoples, not parties. And I think that it's so important today to get out of the rhetoric that we see in DC and get back into communities. Communities are what built this country, what built the labor movement, and what built corporations. Listen to them. It's people issues, not party issues, that are out there. So we continue to be on the forefront of a lot of that stuff.
Vanessa, what concerns do you have in the context of this particular conversation about the dismantling of DEI?
Well, thank you for that question. I have a lot of concerns about it. And in the utility sector, the fortunate message is that many of the utilities are remaining committed to their DEI programs. And why is that? Well, because there's not enough. There are a lot of positions, hundreds of thousands of positions that are projected to be open in the utility sector in the next, 10 or 15 years, Jim? Yep. And so there is a tremendous need to have, bodies in the seats. And so the utility sector is really being very aggressive around the outreach that they're doing to get people, bodies in the seats so that they have a trained up number of people. So that's the positive side of it. But also, in reality, the vigor, the intensity of the diversity and inclusion and equity efforts has decreased. Many of the utility companies have renamed them. Several of them that have been in the forefront of having particular initiatives to get more women in journey persons roles and to get more veterans, disabled people in those positions have scaled back. So there has been some retraction, although not at the pace that I've seen in some of the other private sector companies in the country. But the other piece that concerns me, though, is that when you see the anti-DEI, it's created, to me, a climate of a lack of civility in many of our workplaces. And so some people feel that they have more or they have less accountability to be civil and respectful in the workplaces because they can't get sued, or, you know, this anti-DEI is out there, so I'm not going to be held accountable for the behaviors that I have. And so we are seeing an uptick in the lack of civility in these organizations. But then we are also seeing an uptick in the number of EEOC complaints. And so people think that because there's been this de-emphasis on DEI, that, you know, the opportunities to file complaints at the EEOC is diminished. Well, that's not the case. In fact, there have been 81,000 more EEOC complaints filed in the last 9 months than we've had before. So people are experiencing it and they are filing complaints about it. But interestingly, if I could just say this, and Jim, I'd like you to jump in, but interestingly, the first and second largest complaints are disability and age. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when you hear the rancor, it's about, oh, it's race and Black people and Latina people are just trying to get something for nothing. That's absolutely not the case. And of course, you know, we don't always go and do our research, so we believe what we hear and not what the facts state. But disability is first by far the number one top file EEOC complaints. When I say by far, I mean 30 times any other category, and then age. And both of those complaints, when EEOC takes them to litigation, they're winning.
Yeah, and to that particular point, Jim, because I'm just kind of wondering, as we are in the midst of a changing, you know, political climate, we have watched administrations change. We've seen what has happened over the various and sundry presidential campaigns. How would you describe where unions are in general as it relates to, you know, the current administration? You know, you've heard the president talk about, you know, clean coal and steel during a campaign. We have seen some changes in how those issues are being addressed. Now I'm talking about the industry, not even the workers, but there is a trickle down effect. How do these political changes affect the workers?
Yeah, we know that it's going to make changes. We know that policies that are in that had job creations in bills before that are now with the mark of a pen, less jobs. We know that. We know that there's impacts to these tariffs. We know that there's impacts to the DE&I atmosphere to it. We know that there's impacts. We also can't stand idle by it. We also got to be educated on it and look at it. Is all of the labor market in the same place? No, they're not. Some of the public sectors have been attacked in certain ways compared to the private sector. But this is not the first attack that labor has had. We've seen what happened with the Reagan time with air traffic controllers. Right?
Yes, I remember. I was very young, but I remember that.
Yeah. We knew what happened when the auto workers went through the strike issues in Michigan, in Flint, Michigan. So we've always been on it. Workers organize labor and join unions for a common value, and that's dignity and respect. When Vanessa talked about DE&I kind of being pulled back, I want to comment on that. I don't care what label you put on it. Every worker, every individual deserves dignity and respect. I grew up with those values as a young boy, and I still live by those values. And that's as simple as thank you for what you've done today, and I appreciate what your value is in the society side of it. And I think that people need to really be concerned about pushing back on dignity and respect. Everybody deserves it, from the boss to the worker, and people need to embrace it. And the same thing is with the same thing with the legislation that comes out of DC. And that's not just in a DC area. That's sometimes we've seen Wisconsin with right to work, right? We see areas across this country that has right to work laws. Workers deserve a voice. People deserve a voice. when you have corporate interest and it's just looking at corporate gains, and sometimes I make the comment, their only friends are really dead presidents, not people. They forget the value of a person. A dollar bill is not going to give you dignity and respect. Treating people, putting your hand out or holding a door or saying thank you is a different side of it. And we got to get back to those values in our own society, in our workplaces, in our government, and really what we do day in and day out, and get back to some of the core values are really what built us to be a great nation.
Are you concerned at all about the recent mass deportations and what impact, if any, have those deportations had on your constituency?
So a lot of the utility world doesn't have a vast majority of immigration issues because of the security things that go in, and we're not a hiring organization like some other organizations. So the company vets the person before they come in, so we don't see it as much. But I do sit at the table at the AFL-CIO, and I hear other organizations, and I see the impacts of it, and I worry about that. I do worry about it, and I keep an eye on it. From where our groceries are coming, we go to the grocery store every day, and an immigrant has touched that vegetable that we're picking up, or the fruit we're picking up. So what's the impacts of it? Is there going to be the groceries on the shelf? Is there dollar impacts to it? And then also, if there's less people to do these jobs, where does the pull and the strain, and we're watching this on utility workers, somebody who maybe entered the utility world as a helper or an apprentice side of the work, is there other jobs out there that they may leave, maybe 2 years in the utility world, but may leave because the value of somebody building a home down the block is giving them a little bit more per hour. Utilities then will lose that worker who they started to train and spent a lot of economics on developing that person for a lifetime in the industry. So is there a push and a pull on it to make sure of it? The other piece that we're watching, really kind of looking at, is like I talked earlier about the future of the utilities. We know that families aren't as big as they were in this country. The kids I grew up on the block with had 5, 6 siblings in the household. Households are having 1 kid or 2 kids today. That means our labor market's going to shrink. Yeah, AI may take some of it, automation may take some of it, but the truth be told, there's going to be plenty of jobs out there. Do we have enough families growth to fill those jobs? Or do we really got to look at things in the future, incarcerated individuals, making sure they have entry back into the workplace, making sure immigration has a right policy for back in the workplace. I watch what goes on with the immigration policy. The immigrants don't want bad actors or bad people in their communities, but there has to be a way. My parents were both immigrants to this country. They developed, my father worked in the utility industry. My mother worked for home households. There's got to be a way and a path for people to make the same dream my parents had for them, no matter where they come from. And no matter if it's South America or from Europe, we got to give them, that's the land, we are the land of opportunity. We got to afford them the same opportunity as many of folks who have come here before have been given.
Vanessa, in the past, when you've had conversations with high-ranking managers or even corporate C-suite people, what is it that you believe needs to happen for there to be a more cohesive relationship between union and management, or union and C-suite? Does there need to be a wholesale change in attitude? Does there need to be a crisis? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, many organizations have been in crisis when they looked at their safety numbers, their productivity numbers, their profitability. And, that's what the C-suite is pretty much accountable for. So I think it's important for the C-suite to lead courageously, to put their values around the importance of engaged employees, and make sure that doesn't trickle down, but that goes down in a very profound way, that employees are mattered, and we're going to have engaged employees. And by engaged employees, we speak to those individuals in the workplace that are prepared and willing to provide that discretionary effort to an organization. We know that in the American workforce, over 60% of our employees are disengaged. 60%, that means 6 out of every 10 are like, hey, I'm coming to work, I'm gonna do what I'm supposed to do, pick up my check, and I'm gonna go home. But we know for organizations to be able to win, they have to have employees who are willing to do more than just what's required of them, to really be engaged and provide those, offer those solutions and put in that extra effort. And so I think it's particularly important for that sweet seat leader to make sure that people understand that that is not just an idea for this month, but that's a fundamental way that an organization is going to operate. And that is by having more engaged employees and therefore investing in the management and leadership under them to train them on what does it look like? What does it mean really for you day to day to be driving engagement in the people that report to you, so that they understand what are the behavioral expectations. They also understand how they're going to be held accountable and how they're going to be rewarded for creating a culture of highly engaged people. And interestingly, that number, that 60% number, is just not unique to the United States. That's almost consistent around the world. Yeah. So organizations need to figure out, how do they turn on that excitement in the people that work for them, and that excitement and willingness to contribute to the overall success of the company.
Jim, I've got about 30 seconds. I'll let you have the final word on this issue.
Well, I appreciate everything, and even Dr. Weaver in it. What she said is 100%. 100%. Workers have to be engaged in it and respected back in it. Their values. All workers want is really to be treated with respect in the workplace. They like what they do. All workers that I've talked to like what they do. It's the BS around the circle of it that they don't like. They like the common core of what they do. They like to be treated with value. It's very simple. If you treat your children the same way, your children will keep coming back to you. If you don't, at the age of 18, they want to run out. And it's the same thing with workers. That retirees today I see leave the workplace and don't want to look back. We got to change this parameter to build a better and stronger United States and better corporations in the United States. Workers are valuable. Treat them with that value when you say it.
I think that's a great way to end this conversation. I appreciate your time. Dr. Vanessa Weaver, always good to see you. Jim Slevin, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Good work, good luck as you continue to represent the workers and the other members of your constituency. Looks like we've got a lot of work on all sides.
Yes.
I thank the Daily Drum for really raising this conversation to your audience, because it's an important one. So thank you.
Well, yeah, I'm a union member too, and that's all I got to say about that. So that is the Daily Drum for this Monday, July 14th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.